This public hearing for Monday, January 25th, 2021. And I'd like to call the public hearing to order and begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Kaitsi-Kwantlen Masqui, the Semi-Amu First Nations. With me tonight, I have Councillor Paul Albrecht, Councillor Terry James, Councillor Gail Martin, Councillor Nathan Pahal, Councillor Rudy Storterboom, and Councillor Rosemary Mullins. For staff, we have Francis Chung, our Chief Administrative Officer, Darren Light, our Director of Corporate Services, Carl Johansson, our Director of Development Services, Rick Baumhoff, our Director of Engineering, Parks and Environment, Kim Hilton, our Director of Recreation, Culture and Community Services, Kelly Kenny, our Corporate Officer, and Scott Kennedy, our Acting Fire Chief. And so this public hearing is being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act in order to consider Bylaw 3146, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw, a bylaw to amend the City of Langley Official Community Plan Bylaw 2005 number 2600 to incorporate provisions for higher density, low-rise residential uses of up to 6 stories in height and a maximum floor area ratio of 2.10 for the properties located at 20689 and 20699 Eastleigh Crescent. Bylaw 3147, Zoning Amendment Bylaw, a bylaw to rezone the properties located at 20689 and 20699 Eastleigh Crescent from the RM1 multiple residential low density zone to the CD71 comprehensive development zone to accommodate a 6-story, 88-unit apartment development. I would like to thank everyone for attending this public hearing, which is taking place by electronic means via Zoom. If we encounter technical challenges during the meeting, please stand by, as we want to ensure everyone who wishes to speak is afforded the opportunity to do so. This public hearing is being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel and is also being recorded and will be posted to the city's website. If you are watching and wish to attend this electronic meeting, you can go to www.langleycity.ca to register and join the meeting. At this public hearing, those in attendance at this electronic meeting who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaw will be allowed to make representations to council and shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the bylaw. Once in the meeting, you may use your raise hand function to indicate your wish to speak, which will automatically put you in the speaker queue. You will be invited to speak in the order in which your hands are raised. When it is your turn to speak, staff will prompt you with a message asking you to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking. Please commence your comments to council by clearly stating your name and street address. Unit numbers are not required. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the bylaw. Your name, address, and comments will form part of the record of this public hearing. Members of council may, if they wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of a council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Once you have completed your comments, staff will mute your microphone. Everyone shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. I'm asking that you keep your comments to no more than 5 minutes to allow everyone who wishes to speak an opportunity to do so. Once everyone who wishes to speak has done so, I will call for speakers for a second time, at which time those who wish to speak again should indicate so by using the raise hand function. I will then call for speakers for a third time and final time. If there are no speakers, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. The public was also given the opportunity to provide written submissions for this public hearing. All submissions will be retained by the corporate officer, and copies of the submissions will be made available from her on request following the hearing and shall form part of the public record of these proceedings. Ms. Kenny, can you please advise how notification was provided for this public hearing and whether we have received any correspondence?
Yes, Madam Mayor. A notice pertaining to the bylaws was mailed to properties within 100 meters of the subject properties. Newspaper advertisements were placed in the January 14th and 21st editions of the Langley Advance Times, and a notice was placed outside the entrance to City Hall and on the city's website. And we did receive correspondence from both TransLink and Metro Vancouver in relation to bylaw 3146, and 3 pieces of correspondence were received from members of the public in relation to both bylaw 3146 and bylaw 3147, all of which were circulated to council.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so bylaw 3146, official community plan amendment bylaw. And I believe Mr. Johansson will be speaking to it.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, so this proposed bylaw involves adding a new low-rise residential land use to the current official community plan or OCP to accommodate the density and height of a proposed 6-story apartment building with a density of 1.91 floor area ratio or FAR, which is consistent with what's being proposed in the new draft OCP, which has recently been posted on the city's website for public review and comment. Now, if I can share my screen, I'm just going to show a series of slides here. It gives some context to the site and the land uses in the area. So just get this onto full screen here. Okay, so I'm assuming everyone can see this, so you can see the subject site outlined in yellow, 20689 and 99 Eastleigh Crescent. So just going to show the proposed land uses here in the draft new OCP. So down here in the left-hand side here, left-hand corner is transit-oriented residential land use, which allows residential and some commercial development up to 15 stories. And that coincides with the existing C1 zoning in this area. And north of Eastleigh, the proposed land use is low-rise residential, which is 4 to 6 stories. And in this area in particular, on the north side of Eastleigh Crescent, with these properties here that they're likely to redevelop in the coming decades, the new OCP proposes policy of allowing 6 stories along Eastleigh, but because there is a well-established neighborhood to the north here that includes 3-story townhouses and apartments, which likely isn't going to change for many, many decades, the OCP has guidance to require buildings to step down to a 4-story expression along this north property line to create that good neighbor transition. Okay, so I will stop sharing here and just wrap up my comments. So as you know, the proposed application involves a 6-story building which steps down to the north property line to facilitate that good neighbor transition. And in order for the proposal to proceed prior to the anticipated adoption of the new OCP, the applicant applied for an OCP amendment in the summer of 2020 to enable their proposed development to enter the development application process ahead of the expected adoption of the OCP, which is anticipated in April of this year. So as part of this process, the applicant undertook public consultation on the proposal with the surrounding neighborhood back in August of last year. And feedback from this consultation was used to tailor the design of their proposal. And that's something that the applicant will be talking to as well. And as the clerk mentioned, we referred out to agencies as part of this OCP amendment, and we received comment from Metro Vancouver and TransLink in support. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Johansson. Ms. Kuzak, can you please advise if there is anyone in attendance electronically at this meeting who wishes to speak to bylaw 3146?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 5 people in attendance. None are indicating at the moment that they would like to speak to this bylaw.
Okay, so I'll call for a second time for speakers on bylaw 3146.
And so far, nothing. May I add, if you'd like to speak, to please hit the raise your hand function. We have a speaker, Mr. Latek. All right, can you hear us, Mr. Latek?
Yes. My name is Duran Latek from 20669 Eastlake Crescent in Langley. I am in favor of the amendments. There is a need for more housing in this area. It is close to transit and increased density is needed in order to improve the area. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for your comments and for attending tonight. Okay, so I will call for a third and final time for speakers on bylaw 3146.
It doesn't appear that anyone else would like to speak at this time, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you, Ms. Kazak. Seeing no speakers, do any members of council have any questions for Mr. Johansson in regards to bylaw 3146? I see none. Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, we have a speaker now raising his hand, if you'll indulge.
Yeah, go ahead. Just please state your name and your address, please.
Tony, can you hear us? Tony? Perhaps you're muted.
Hi. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah, I am Tony Louis. I support this project going on because in Langley, the population going so fast and we need this low-rise, high-density project going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Tony. And I'm sorry, what is your address? Your address, sorry, Tony. I think we've lost him. Okay, so did any members of council have any questions regarding bylaw 3146? If not, we will move on to bylaw 3147.
Madam Mayor, excuse me, Madam Mayor, we have another speaker. Miss Kao.
Okay, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'd like to know whether this is a
Madam Mayor, can we ask for the address, please?
Yes, I was just going to do that. Thank you.
20771. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to know whether this building, this is a rental property or private residential.
Can I get clarification from staff, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And that's something that the applicant can also speak to when we talk about the rezoning application next on the agenda. But I believe that the building is to be stratified.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Kao, or was that?
It appears we don't have any further speakers for this bylaw.
Okay, so we will call for a third and final time. Any other speakers? Anybody from council? Okay, so we will move on to bylaw 3147, zoning amendment bylaw. Mr. Johansson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening once again, Mayor and Council and members of the audience. Continuing on with this application on the subject site, the applicant's proposing to rezone the properties to a site-specific comprehensive development zone or CD zone. as currently we don't have an existing zone that can accommodate the proposed OCP land use that I just referred to in the previous item. That being said, the zone that we're anticipating to bring forward to accommodate this land use, this application is consistent with, and in fact is a little bit less than what the density, the maximum density that's anticipated. So the applicant, in response to comments from the OCP consultation phase, they've pulled back. One of the key features of the design, and I'm sure that the applicant will speak to it, is that they've pulled back their the north wall of their parkade about 1.5 meters from the rear property line to ensure large trees on the neighboring properties to the north are not impacted during excavation building construction, so they can be retained, as these are a key part of maintaining the privacy between properties. And the applicant's also taking care on how to design the back of the building in terms of not having balconies directly facing buildings to the north. And they are proposing a variance to have bicycle parking combined with their storage lockers. And that's something we're also contemplating with our zoning bylaw, but also a function of the building being in a challenging flood elevation area where you can't have that kind of storage down below. So they found a way to combine that, and that's something that staff is supporting. Now it is a comprehensive development zone, so technically there's not a variance in terms of parking, but what they're proposing is about 4.7% less. That's what in our current bylaw in terms of parking. But given that the site is very close to the existing transit exchange, and with a 10-minute walk of the future SkyTrain station, the proposed parking reduction is supportable from a staff point of view, and it's quite close to what we're contemplating for our zoning bylaw for properties that are close to transit. But I do note that the visitor parking, proposed visitor parking amount is consistent with the bylaw, and they're also proposing a loading zone. So perhaps with that, I will mention that the application was received positively by the advisory design panel on December 1st. And I believe that the applicant has a presentation for you.
Great. So I believe Keystone Architecture is here to speak to the proposed bylaw.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you, Director. I appreciate that those words. I'm just going to share my screen. Just to introduce myself, my name is Colin Nachtigall with Keystone Architecture. I'm here with Eric Poxleitner, who's also with Keystone Architecture, and he's the architect of record with the project, as well as Stefan Ferrario, Jess Dillon, who are the owners of the project, and Clark Cavalinis, which is the landscape architect. I believe he's here. So let me just share my screen. So as mentioned, the project is at 20689 and 20699 Eastlake Crescent. It is a CD site-specific zone that we've based on RM3. And the design and zoning approach has been aligned with the future OCP guidelines that Director Johansson had mentioned. So that's where the increased height comes from and density comes from. As mentioned, the FAR is 1.91. Overall square footage is 76,853 square feet. And we're proposing 88 units with the variance of combined parking and storage. You'll see some renderings scattered throughout, and we'll end the presentation with a few renderings of it. So just look for that as we go through the. So here's just a view of the context map surrounding the proposed development location. It's just north of 56th Avenue on Eastlake Crescent. And we have a few circles there which note the travel times in minutes. So within 5 minutes, you can get to the Twin Rings just off Fraser Highway, or off the bypass rather, and downtown city, or the downtown area of city of Langley. And then within 10 minutes, you were by Kwantlen, and further out to the south by Douglas Park. And if you're familiar with the area, it's just northwest of the old Legion, if you can remember when that was there. This is a 3D view, massing view of the proposed development with it superimposed on top of the existing buildings and structures there. We've also graded in the future, well, actually completed development at 56th and Eastlay. There was a 5-story that was just completed. And there's also a proposed 6-story at the corner of Eastlay and Glover Road. So just to give some context of what the neighborhood is going to transition towards once more of these developments come in, as Director Johansson had mentioned. And here's just a graphical image of the site plan. So the how the building operates is it's got 6-story or at-grade units along Eastlay Crescent that have a walk-up feature with patios and to engage that street front. And then there is surface parking as well as a parkade that you can access along the west side of the property. Now because of the floodplain, this building is up outside of that and set up. So the podium level that we're looking at here with the surface parking is about 5 to 6 feet above Eastlay Crescent. And then it ramps down to a secured underground parking for resident parking. The visitor parking is at this surface level here. And one of the comments that was brought up during the ADP was just the security of this area. So we've allowed for provision of securing the visitor parking at the surface. The resident parking is currently secured, and we're proposing to use aluminum extruded fencing that is quite nice and is not black chain link fence. The other thing just to mention is that there's quite a large amount of outdoor amenity on the northeast side of the property, and that connects to the indoor amenity as well. These items were mentioned by the ADP just to create some connectivity on the side of the property along with the indoor amenities. So we've incorporated that too. And there was concern about separating the outdoor amenity from the surface parking, which we provided additional trees and planting in that landscape planter there that you can see just here along the middle of the property. So we have a landscaping, as mentioned, Clark Cavalinas with C. Cavalinas and Associates is on board with us doing the development. And one of the comments that was brought up was the incorporating some outdoor play, from the ADP was incorporating some outdoor play and some garden community boxes for planting. So we've incorporated those suggestions onto this development, and it's reflected with that. You can see some of the play structures that we're proposing for the outdoor activity for children of the development. One of the items to mention, so this is our shadow studies of the project. And one thing that we'd like to touch on is just the shape of the building. Now the massing of the building is actually a bit of a T shape with the larger mass along Eastlay, and the smaller kind of T portion of it extends towards the northern developments that are lower. So we're pulling the massing away from those lower communities and pushing it towards the street, and thereby reducing the shadow impact on the neighboring properties. It's one of the critical things that we worked with on the city on that, just to make sure that our impact on the surrounding neighborhoods was not over than what it already is. This is the parking for the project. So that's a shot of our parkade design. This is again what I was mentioning earlier about the secured resident parking down below. So almost the entire site is parkade except for those portions along the south there where the units actually extend down towards grade. One item to touch on over here is that we are providing 6 electric vehicle stalls. And for future design, one of the one of the important things that the client had for the project is to provide rough-in for future EV charging stations and the infrastructure along with that. So we're future-proofing the development so that we're not cornering ourselves away from EV stalls, only providing 6, but we're actually providing more that could potentially be converted to at a later date by the residents. Again, this is the site plan with the first floor, and you can see on the south there those at-grade units that are connected to the street. And then again, the indoor amenity that connects to the outdoor amenity. one of the critical things that came up from the ADP as well was just creating an indoor-outdoor connection between those spaces, having big open windows and open doors that you can go in and out. And then while we're here too, the loading zone that Director Johansson had mentioned is there just at the top of the ramp, so that any sort of trucks coming in or parcel delivery doesn't have to sit on the street and take up East Lake Crescent, which is already, we know is concerned for the width of it. So we're trying to get those larger vehicles off the street and up onto the property. One thing to notice down here as well is there's the fire truck access that runs along the west side of the property, and that's those 4 dashed lines on the left side of the sheet that allow for fire truck to get up on top of the podium to deal with any sort of issues that might come up, any sort of emergencies. These are our typical floor plans above. So once we get to that second floor, now it's a full apartment kind of layout. You can see the elevator at the center and then just standard units throughout. As we start going up the building, you'll see that the footprint actually gets smaller, and that was through coordination with and consultation with the city regarding that, being mindful of the neighboring properties to the north. So on the floor, on the 5th floor here, you can see that we've actually pulled back the footprint, and that continues again to the 6th floor. So there's actually 2 steps in the building as it goes up, so that we're mindful of our footprint on the neighboring buildings. And just going back to the public information meeting summary that we had back in the summer, as Director Johansson mentioned, we had 2 of them. There was some concern for the first one that some people weren't able to attend, so we had a second to allow for everyone to give their commentary. And some of the items that we ran into was just the increased height, and so that's where that stepping down of the building is coming from, and tiering the building. Increased density was a concern, but we're providing the parking minus that 5% reduction, and we are close to conventional bus routes. So we're mindful of that. And then there was comments of privacy issues, just again with a bigger building south of the smaller three-story buildings and townhomes to the north, which again, as Director Johansson mentioned, we've orientated the balconies on that side of the development so that they're not facing into those units. They're facing east and west, and not down into the adjacent neighboring properties. And we've also brought in the parkade farther away from the property line to allow for the retention of those trees, those mature trees, and providing additional screening through landscaping, both at grade and at the podium level, so that there's almost a tiering effective screening. So one of the critical things was the again, the stepping of the building. Now, as Director Johansson mentioned, there's the OCP guidelines of 6 stories on Eastlay and 4 stories as it moves towards the north. And so we've proposed that in this development where we've stepped back the building 2 times, 2 tiers, so that the impact on the adjacent buildings is lessened. In addition to the stepping, as I mentioned, the trees in between there's some large mature trees that are being retained and additional trees that are being added. And this is the section going east-west. Again, setback from the property lines, our setbacks are 7.5 meters on either side, actually more additional or farther than that on the west side. Here's the building elevations. We'll get to the materials in just a second. Just give you an idea of what the building looks like from the 2D elevations. And there's that north elevation that's fronting on the adjacent property, and the east elevation that's fronting on the adjacent property to the east. And here's the material boards for or proposed materials for the development. So one of the critical, one of the items that working with the client was just we are going for or higher end materials like brick and hardy cementitious hardy panel or cementitious panel and lap siding, wood tone lap siding, to create interesting streetscape and interesting kind of at-grade units that disguise the 6-story building, so that on Eastlay the impact of it is lessened. Here's a rendering basically from the new development across the street from that perspective, showing that brick cementitious panel, lap siding, and that stepping of the building going back towards the apartment above there. So we've actually, one of the items that's a little hard to show in the floor plans before is the lower units, the at-grade units are pulled towards the street, and the second through sixth floors are set back so that there's less impact on the street, and it's not so imposing as you walk towards the building. And here's a shot from the northeast corner of the property showing the amenity space and the indoor and outdoor amenity. There's again that screening between the surface parking and the outdoor amenity. One other critical item that was mentioned during the ADP, now that we're at this rendering here, was the creating light, getting light underneath the parking, the surface parking. So now that we're in developing the plans further with the electrical consultant, or one of the critical things is providing ample parking on that surface, underground, or that surface parking, so that there's septet issues are addressed and people can feel safe and secure in that area. Here's another further back shot, kind of from the neighboring property, from the Ivy Lee property. I can see that we're showing those large trees that are there, that we're retaining and that we're not taking out with the parkade to create that screening effect towards the neighboring property. And then here's from the northwest corner showing the parkade entrance that goes down to the parkade, and the street interface on Eastley, that ramp there. And again, just showing the materials and the massing of the building as it's stepping down towards the north. And that is the last of my slides. I'll just leave it on that one. So that's the development there. That's our presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen now and write questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Ms. Kuzak, can you please advise if there's anyone in attendance at this meeting who wishes to speak to bylaw 3147?
Hi, we still have 5 people in attendance, and if you can indicate that you would like to speak by raising your hand, I'd be happy to introduce you. All right, Ms. Ko, can you please start by stating your name and address, please?
Yes, Bruce 20771. I remember last time when I attended the online meeting with the builder, and I know that there will be a garbage collection near the parking, and I wonder, do they design it so that it won't look very obvious from our side of the north side of the property, because evidently this building is a lot higher than our side. So the garbage collection side, if you don't beautify it, it will look very, not so pleasant to our side.
Great, thank you for those comments, Ms. Kale. So your concern is that the garbage receptacle area will not be beautified. Can I get someone to answer that, or?
Yeah, I can address that. So we have provided a landscape screen that runs behind the garbage enclosure that's on the parkade there. If you'd like me to share my screen, I can point that out to you. One moment. So just along the north here, you can see that the landscape screening runs right along and screens that garbage enclosure.
So that that whole line there, that's a planter?
Yes,
Of
that's
the-
correct. Yeah.
Do you know how high, how tall that will be?
We've allowed for trees to be able to be planted in there. I believe we were proposing a hedgerow in that.
Mm-hmm. That will cover the garbage enclosure?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification then. Ms. Kao, did you have any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I don't know when this project will start and how long it was going to take.
Okay. Can I get staff to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Following the public hearing tonight, council will then have to deliberate and decide on third reading of the bylaw, and then the servicing agreement and other items need to be fulfilled before it can all be brought back to council for consideration of adoption and issuance of the development permit. And then, of course, the building permit, that process will play out. All that's in the hands of the developer, and in terms of which I would suggest they speak to this, either the architect or the developer, and then they can speak to anticipated time of construction if it is approved by council.
Yes, I can speak to that. The timeline would be an 18-month construction process that would hopefully start in the summer once we receive building permit. But again, as Director Johansson mentioned, that's dependent upon reviews of building permit and development permit. One item I wanted to touch on that I want to make clear on this is that the parking for construction, any sort of construction crews, will be provided off-site for the development by the developer. So I know that was a concern about having construction vehicles crowd the street, and that will be taken care of off-site.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Kao, is that enough? Did you have any other questions?
Yes. I know the one just across the street of your new development, that new apartment, when they were building it, I think they tried to, because we could feel the impact, the noise, and the large, what's it called that? When they vibration from that construction, and this one is even closer to our property, and I'm quite concerned. Those while they are building it, those construction, process, is it going to have they evaluated the impact on our foundation of our property, or any way to cut down the noise and the dust?
Yeah, I can touch on that. Yes, this was brought up previously in our public information meetings, and the construction of the building has typical isolated slabs, isolated foundations. So there shouldn't be any pounding or drilling you would see with, say, like building a bridge or whatnot, or you have to do piles. We're able to do a conventional foundation there. But one item that was mentioned, and just to remind the public, that if there are any concerns towards the construction process, there will be signs on the around the property itself of the contractor and the number to call on there for any sort of items that may be affected during construction. And so they did want to just make people remind people that always can call that number, and they will remedy whatever happening there if there's an effect from the construction that happens on their property. And obviously they'll allow or align with the noise bylaws that are set in place. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll call for a second time for speakers on bylaw 3147.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Mr. Latek, if you could start your comments by stating your name and address, please.
Duran Latek, 20669 East Lake Crescent. I'd like to confirm my support of the amendment. Feel that the design is well thought out and will benefit the neighborhood.
Great, thank you for your comments. Okay, second time for speakers on bylaw 3147. Any other public?
Doesn't look like anyone is indicating to speak, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so I will call a third and final time for anyone who wishes to speak to bylaw 3147 from the public.
No further
Okay,
speakers.
great, Ms. Kuzak. See no more speakers. Do any members of council here tonight have any questions regarding bylaw 3147 for the developer? Councillor Albrecht?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. And I'm glad to hear that you're arranging for parking for construction trades and during construction. Our experiences here is that that becomes a very contentious issue in neighborhoods when we have construction going up. So I really want to reinforce the need to ensure that anyone associated with the construction of the building is not parking out on the streets. I know it's convenient and it's easier, but it does create a lot of issues. That and along with the tracking of dirt, mud, debris out on our roads creates a lot of issues too. So just wanted to put those two things out there to make sure that they get taken care of. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And to Councillor Albrecht's point, the Eastleigh project is on my walking route every morning, as is some of the areas on Bryden Crescent. And I know that in the Bryden Crescent area, which I do check out weekly, because walking is the thing to do, there's signs that say no trades parking. And every time I walk by there at 7 a.m. in the morning, it's fully loaded with trades. So I know that council can be told things, and sometimes that doesn't turn into reality. So this area, again, to be open, because I've heard public feedback as well, that particular stretch of road, I have received significant public feedback over the last month. So I think I'll be watching this one particularly closely. And I think this is a great opportunity to set a real positive example of how development can be done right in an area that's already established. So I look forward to seeing the measures in place, and I look forward to see no trades parking on Eastleigh Crescent. So thank you.
Great, thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I guess we are done the closed public hearing. So may I have a mover and seconder to close the public hearing? Councillor Albrecht, Councillor Wallace, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So the public hearing is closed. These bylaws will come forward for consideration of third reading at a future council meeting. So thank you very much for coming tonight.